Hello fellow woodworkers and welcome to this week's edition of the Garage Workshop, and this week we're going to be working on a new storage unit for my mitre bench. Roll the intro. So fellow woodworkers, if you've got a workshop or a garage or a shed like me, I'm sure you've got quite a lot of inconvenient sort of nooks and crannies where you'd like to put things but they're not quite big enough for this, or they're too small for that. So in this video I'm just going to address a couple of the little issues I'm having with minor storage around the workshop. I've got a couple of spaces that are the sides of units or the size of my side of my dust hood that's attached to my mitre saw, where really the space isn't being used as effectively as it can. But as you can see from behind me, I've got a huge amount still on my workbench here that I need to find a place for. So in this little video, I'm going to hopefully bash up a couple of little cabinets or potentially little storage units that I can put some of these things in. Now, one of the things that I have a lot of lying around the garage workshop are these blue nesting containers. I've got tons and tons of these. So what I'd like to try and do is build a system where I can incorporate as many of these as I can without basically affecting the size of the unit, without making it too big. One of the spaces that I've got is right by where my garage door shuts, so I've got to be very careful because of the arc of the door that I don't protrude too far from the end of the unit. And at some point during this year, that unit is going to get replaced. I'm going to change it and do something different. But what I'd like to do is see if I can incorporate as many of these as possible so that I can just get rid of some of the little bits and bobs I've got lying around, like little medium-sized bolts, washers, that sort of thing. So I've got an idea in my head of how I want this to work. It's going to be a basic sort of grid system, but what's going to be different about this is I want to make it completely movable, as in I want to be able to move these at any points or reconfigure it. So I'm not going to go for a design where I'm sort of stuck in one layer or the other, and I'm going to make this entire project from the scrap wood I've got lying around the workshop. Let's get going. So in line with all my other projects recently, I spent a lot of time on this project measuring, some of which worked and some of which didn't, as you'll find out later. But I wanted to start with really accurate measurements of the size, which is why I actually used the tub when I was measuring in. I then went through the process of selecting all of the wood that I was going to use in this project. Okay, so I've just been through my wood pile and I've got some options for the wood here. Most of it is this piece of wood that I got from a skip, which I mentioned in the Evolution review. I used it in there, and I've used it in a couple of recent projects. I used it on the workbench extension project. I'll put links to those videos in the description. And I've got some pieces of sort of varying quality. All of these three pieces are all from that same piece of wood, and this is actually an offcut from when I did an earlier project. And as you can see, it's in the sort of substantially better condition than these three other pieces. Now, I don't want to put a ton of weight on this construction because what's going to go in it potentially is going to be quite heavy, because I think I'm going to end up putting bolts and nuts and things, and they've all got quite a lot of weight attached to them. So the rigidity is going to be really important, but the other thing that's important is I want to try and keep this weight down as much as possible. When I was looking at the wood, I have decided though, originally I was just going to have this sort of open at the back, backless, but I'm actually going to put a backboard in because I want to support it and keep it as rigid as I can. So it actually will have a back plate, as it were. So I think I'm either I've got two options essentially. I can make a back plate that is the whole exact shape and then just pin it in, or I can cut a groove out of the edge and then sort of seat it in. and I'm going to have a think about which of those options I'm going to go for. But the wood that I need has got to be 91 centimeters, which is the length, the height, sorry, from the floor to the top. This piece of wood, which is probably, excuse me, this piece of wood, which is equal in size pretty much to most of the other bits, not including this bit. This piece of wood is a metre. This other piece of wood, which is pretty much that, yep, that's a metre too. This smaller bit, I've sort of got this in mind for potentially the top or the bottom, or depending how wide the unit is for both. This piece of wood, I'm potentially going to put all at the top or the bottom. It's a little bit thicker, and I just think it might be a bit better there. So although I've got a mixture of wood, I'm not going to worry too much about that, because each of these has got, apart from this one on the side with the sticker, has got a better side than the other one. So this one is quite dirty on the top, but as you can see, it is a bit clearer on the bottom, with the exception of that sticker, knowing the well-known brand it came from. So the height I've got, the gap is 91. I'm not going to use up all of that space. I think that's quite a significant size. So what I'm actually going to go for is about 90 centimeters, I think, which will also potentially give me the option of storing something on the top. So I'm going to go for 90 centimeters. In terms of depth, I've measured these pots in order to, I don't want to put the whole thing in. I'm going to leave like the front bit hanging out. So having just measured it from the back to the bit essentially where it's going to be level or flush with the cabinet, I've got 13 centimeters. So I need two sides that are 13 centimeters by 90 centimeters. Now in terms of the top and the bottom, the width I've got from side to side is 70, but again 70 is more than I think I'm going to need. So I think I'm probably going to go for 66 maybe. The other thing I might do actually is just measure these. Each one of these, it's 10 centimeters. So if I went for an internal gap of 60, then I'm going to be able to get 6 on this. So I'm going to go for internal gap of 60. Now, because the weight of this, the pressure of this is going to be pulling down essentially, I'm not going to put the board flat across the top, if you see what I mean. I'm going to put the board so it's like that, and then that way when this pulls down, it's pulling with the strength of the joint. If I do it this way, I'm not entirely sure it will be as strong, because it's sort of pulling, it'll just pull that straight out. So here it's sort of tied in. Let me know in the comments if you think that's a major mistake. I just get the feeling that having it that way will help with distributing the weight when it gets pulled down. So the width of these, actually, I didn't check the width of this, I just said 13. So I've got 14 here, which is fine. I can just take an edge off that, which I would probably do anyway, because I can see there's some marks on here, and obviously that edge has been cut. So the first thing I'm going to do is run that through the table saw, get a nice straight edge as a sort of reference, and then I'll take that back. So I've got enough there, this piece top and the bottom, and what I might do is save this bit for now, either for shelves or for the internal dividers. So I'll break out the table saw now. Let's get these bits cut. Let's offer them up and see how they look. The next thing I did was run all of the pieces through the table saw to make sure I ran it through a couple of mil just to give me a straight edge, because this was part of that plywood that I'd used previously and it looked a little bit like it wasn't straight. Then obviously I got the right width and I started pushing all of the pieces of wood through. When I'd done that, I had a nice set, and I then began the process of marking everything out for the right width. And actually the width on this project changed quite a lot all the way through. I then set up a stop block, and you can see it there, and I just then started
cutting the pieces down before knocking them back with a hand plane, a hand sanding block at first. And actually, when I did this, it did make me realise that a lot of the dirt that's on that plywood was actually going to come off. So I decided to go for a full sand. I was just sort of trying to knock off the edges here and take the worst bits out, and then obviously I offered them up to see how it was looking. And at this point, I was blissfully unaware that I'd actually measured incorrectly, even though you'll see me measure 5, 6, 7 times in this video probably. I had not realised that I had allowed for the bottom and the top to be outside instead of inside, but it was easy to correct, and I'll explain that a little bit later in the video. I then picked up this piece of wood that I got from B&Q, which is just a spare piece, and I ran that through the table saw to try and get it to be the right size for the back of the unit. But as sometimes happens in woodworking, I made a mistake.
So, fellow woodworkers, as only can happen to me, I just fed the piece of wood that I'm going to use as the backing board through the table saw the wrong way round. So instead of cutting off the bottom and leaving the correct width, I've cut off the width and left an incorrect bottom. Nobody wants an incorrect bottom, do they? So this piece of wood, which I have now cut, is way the length it needs to be, but it's actually only 58.5 centimeters, and the width it needs to be is 66 centimeters, which leaves me with two options. Potentially I can narrow the unit, or I can see if I can find another piece of wood. I don't have any wood here that I can use. The only option I've got is to batten it, and if I do that, then I'm going to reduce the strength, which is the whole reason of having it. Now, the only thing I would say is when I mocked it up on the table a minute ago, it did look very big to me. Probably bigger than it needs to be, if I'm being 100% honest. And the amount that I would be taking off would only be 7.5 centimeters. So I'm just wondering whether I'm better off reducing the width, because each of the trays, the plastic trays that I've got to go on it, are I think they're 8 centimeters across. Let me just check. Sorry, they're 10 centimeters across. So at the moment, I would be able to get 5 in, I think, by the time you take out the wood. So I'd be able to get 5 in, which is probably going to be enough. So I'm tempted, I have to be honest, I'm tempted to just adapt the design, because what I'm worried about is this being on, and even though it's going to be fixed onto the unit, what I don't want it to be is too long and not sort of wide enough. And the other thing is I do need to put some supporting struts in as well, because when I put it together it just looked too big. So I think what I'm going to do is adapt the design, cut these sides to match the width of the board that I've just cut, and then take it from there, because to me, I don't think it's the end of the world losing a bit of width. Now, the other thing I could potentially do with that is also reduce the depth by the same amount, but to be honest with you, I'm not as keen on doing that. I think I'll cut these pieces of wood and I'll dry fit it, and I'll see what it looks like with the back on it. But also, just a reminder, not that you'd need it, because I'm sure none of you would make the stupid mistake I do. You've just got to be careful when you're placing wood, because that was perfectly marked and it would have fitted perfectly had I made the correct cut, which is of course down to human user error. Of course, if there's going to be a user error, it's going to be me. So let's rectify it now.
I didn't realise until I started editing this how much talking to camera I did, so hopefully you're still with me. With that decision made, knocked off the ends, and then it allowed me to shorten the width of the unit, and then I could just cut the bottom piece, the back piece, accordingly. And I did take my time, even though it had sort of factory edges on it. I was checking and double checking everything, as you can see there. Then I thought, yes, I've got everything sorted, and this was the point when I was offering it up that I realised, as you can see there, that I'd over estimated the edge. So what I'd actually done is measured for that unit to go on the top instead of inside, which is quite an easy mistake to make. Well, I think it is, and I'm sticking to that, which is quite an easy mistake to make. And as you can see, it literally was a case of sort of 3/4 of an inch, couple of centimetres coming off, and then all was good to go, and I offered it up, and thankfully it all fitted perfectly at last.
Okay, so I've just dry fitted this. Sometimes the simplest of projects on the outside actually turn out to be quite difficult. Well, they certainly do where I'm concerned, because I've somehow managed to get the measuring wrong, which, as you will have seen, it's not through lack of measuring. I've measured quite a lot. But I just had to trim another little bit off the end. So actually what I've got now in terms of the internal width is 56, which isn't a problem because what I have noticed is I'm gonna need to fix the shelves in here, I think. The reason that I'm saying that is I'm just a bit concerned about how strong this is going to be. And I had originally thought I'll put movable shelves in, but the more I think about it, I don't actually think that the effort of doing that is going to be worth the reward, because to me, it's only going to have the things on it that are going to stay on it. And if I do want to ever change it, I can always pop out the shelves and move them. So with that in mind, I think what I'm going to do is screw the shelves in from the side that go this way, but I am going to put a shelf sort of fairly down the middle. I'm not going to keep that a single piece. I'm going to cut that into sort of slats, because what I am worried about a little bit is how rigid this is going to be. And if I put shelves in with such a big span, I think they might droop with the weight that's on them. So the plan now is to cut some sections to section this off, and then I'm going to put some individual slats down the middle. So it's turning out to be a little bit of a bigger project than I thought, and I did have a little fiddle with my sanding block, and I managed to get some of the dirt off of this. So I am going to sand all of these sides and just see if I can take a layer back to get it to look presentable, basically, because some of this wood, although it's nice and straight and it's in good condition in terms of its sort of structuralness, it's not damaged or anything, some of it's very dirty and it doesn't look great, and some of them I can, rotate them and things like that, but not looking brilliant. So the next stage is to cut some internal slats, and then I'm going to go and fill in the center sections. And obviously having 56 mil on here, which is what I've got now, so I've got about 22 inches, with the width of the board being 12, then I've still got more than enough space for what I want to do, really, which is to get 5 in. So let's have a little fiddle, because obviously the width of these, I should have said, sorry, the width of these is 10 centimeters. So I should be able to get at least 4 in comfortably, possibly 5 with the pieces of wood down the middle. And I've got I can put MDF down the middle. It doesn't have to be plywood, because obviously if I put plywood in there now, although saying that it's 12 mil plywood, I should still have enough. So enough delaying. So I should just have enough space with a plywood sort of divider down the middle. So I'm going to cut a spacer as well. So the best thing to do now is to just get on with cutting those individual shelves. I think I've got just enough wood left that I can cut them and put them in. So let's do that now.
The next stage was to run the plywood through to make the shelves. I'd pretty much used up that entire sheet of plywood that I got out of a skip on this project and some of the other ones. But to be fair, that's probably done me 2 or 3 projects. I then set up a really rudimentary stop block, as you can see. I have got another video coming up on the stop block. And then I just sanded everything. I actually did this twice, and I can't remember if I've included it, but I sanded it with 80 grit first, and then I took it back with 120. The next thing to do was to pocket hole, which is what I did. I really took my time with these pocket holes, and the actual drill is very, very good quality. Normally I get a lot of sort of tear out and I have to sort of sand them, but I didn't with this one. It was really nice quality. Then I just hooked it together. I think I used 18 mil, maybe 20 mil pocket holes for this. And I literally just took my time bit by bit and got them all exactly as they should be. And then on the last side, just to make sure I kept it nice and level, I just popped a little clamp in to help keep everything together and everything the way it should be. But really happy with how it turned out. You'll see in a sec. There's me just clamping it together to make sure I've got those in exactly the right place. It was very, very rectangular and exactly the right dimensions, both sort of length and width. Then I just knocked back all of the shelves just with the sandpaper. Again, you can see the grids, the disc there is 240. I think I just did 80. I made a tiny little spacer. You can see there 2 spacers. And that enabled me to put the shelves in exactly the right length. And those spacers were just a little bit bigger than the dimensions of the plastic tub. And then it was just a case of pre-drilling and screwing everything. And I'm left with a lot of screw holes down this side, but I've got a little piece of timber, a little piece of plywood that I might just put over that side. Obviously you can't see the other side, it's sort of facing against the wall. But if I don't like it, I can certainly do that. The next thing was to make the sort of upright inserts that were going to go in the shelves, to provide the rigidity that those shelves are going to need, and also just to give me a little bit of a sort of, a divider. So I marked exactly top and bottom, exactly half, and also put a part one in the middle, and then I literally just got a straight edge and I drove all the way down the center of the unit to give me the middle. And then when I put these in, I just literally use that. You can't actually see the line, but trust me, there's a little pencil line there. This was quite easy while I had access to it from the front, but screwing them in from the back was way, way, way more complicated. So as you can see, I'm using my little Temu square there, which I have to say is actually pretty good. I'm using that just to make sure that the angles are both right, sort of up and down, as it were. But I got them all nice and level, and I hooked them all in just using wood screws, and I turned the unit over, and this time I was screwing in from the back, so I was sort of screwing in blind effectively. You can see me there just persuading it with a hammer. But irrespective of that, it was nice and straight, and I'll explain in a minute how I knew it was. But this bit was a bit more tricky because you can see the line straight down the middle there. Look, it's just one in the middle that's not quite straight. I was then able to hook on the back and position of the shelf that went down the middle and on the sides. So when I came to screw in, I knew exactly what I was sort of sinking into, and there wasn't a risk about splitting the wood or going through something. So when I'd done that, I just literally screwed everything down just with small wood screws, and again pre-drilling everything because I didn't want the plywood to split. And here I'm just marking where the shelves are before I pre-drilled and screwed in, obviously, the ones down the middle as well as the ones on the side. But when I'd done that, I was happy, and thankfully my measuring on this bit actually worked out well. Okay, as you will have just seen, I marked and sort of did that blind in terms of screwing through, and I'm pleased to say that I haven't broken through anywhere except for the bottom where I forgot there wasn't one there. And they're pretty much
in line. The one that's out of line is this one, and it's only slight, to be honest, but the rest of them are actually in line. I've just had the measure up against it, so that one I can live with, and I could even persuade it with a hammer if it really bothers me. But the unit is finished now, and I should have said earlier when I did the design phase, I've left this gap on the top or the bottom, depending on how I fix it, just for putting things, other things than this, and actually some of my smaller storage pots will fit in there. So it's already now, I'm just going to hook it up, see how it looks.
So here, it was actually a lot trickier than it looks to get it hooked up. So I just went for hooking it one side, getting it fixed in, and then using the spirit level on my foot just to level it up and get it in the right place. So when I was happy with those two screws at the top and it was nice and level, then I just came overwood and just put in just some random screws in different places just to keep the unit, but it was nice and rigid.
Okay, so fellow woodworkers, as you can see, the storage unit is finished, it's attached. It's completely level on the top and the bottom, but it is out of level with my mitre bench, which tells me two things. Number one, my mitre bench isn't level, and number two, the top on the top of it, the workbench top, is also not level, because as you can see, probably there's a bigger gap from top to bottom. I'm really pleased with how the unit's turned out. For me, I set out to create something that I could put lots of different bits of storage on, and I have certainly achieved that. And also, I'm quite impressed with the build quality, because all of these units, right, they are somewhat, they look a little bit wibbly wobbly. They're not, they're actually a lot straighter than they look. But there was a lot involved in fixing these, particularly these middle struts, which I've secured obviously from the top or the bottom and from the back, and they are absolutely rigid. The whole unit is really, really rigid. So I'm very, very pleased with how it's turned out. I set out to create something to store things on, and I've got that. And I've got this little gap at the top, and I think potentially what I'm going to put here is some of my drill bits, which I use all the time, which I'm all constantly taking out of a different unit and putting in. I've tried the garage door, it shuts, it's not a problem at all, it's not impacting that. So definitely a mission achieved from the beginning, which was to create a storage unit, and I've certainly done that. Thank you so much for watching this week's video. If this is your first time at the channel, please can I ask you to subscribe, like and comment. If you're a regular viewer, same as always, please don't forget to like and comment. I love listening to the comments and reading the comments, and I reply to all of them. Hope you have a fantastic week, fellow woodworkers, and I'll see you on next week's edition of the Garage Workshop. Take care.